Okay.
Good evening, everyone. I would like to call tonight's meeting to order. Thank you to those attending tonight in person and those staying engaged by watching our recording at a later time. The public is reminded that if they wish to speak during community comment, they will need to fill out a speaker form located in the lobby on a table and turn it in to Recording Secretary Kim Colvin, seated at the end on my left. Comments will take place during the designated community comment portion of our agenda. Before we dive into tonight's agenda, I want to take a moment to introduce those seated at the table with me. To my right, Superintendent Degner, Directors Pilcher Hyatt, Eastham, and Vice President Williams. To my left, newly elected Director Molly Abraham, Directors Clausen, Finch, and Recording Secretary Kim Colvin. And with that, we will dive into tonight's agenda, and I just have to pull it up. We have our student representatives with us. So welcome back, and our first student representatives to speak will be from City High. The microphone is over there to our left, sorry guys.
Okay, hi, we're happy to be here. So we're representing City High Student Senate. We're the co-presidents of the Student Senate. We're just gonna go over some of the stuff City High is doing. So we have the City High Parade coming up on Wednesday the 28th, which we were not able to have in the past 2 years, so we're excited to bring it back as a fun, community activity. It's a pretty big deal for City High. We have Homecoming coming up October 1st, which Student Senate plans, and we recently had our first referendum vote for the theme, and we also gave an opportunity for song suggestions. We also recently had our club fair, I believe 2 days ago, that invites students to join all sorts of new clubs, including the Inclusion Club, which is having its first meeting tonight. In addition to that, we have also cast for our fall play, and rehearsals have started. And marching band has been doing an amazing job at all of our performances so far.
Yeah, so the school year is off to a great start. There's a lot of energy around the school, lots of school spirit. This past Friday, we had our first home football game against Ames, which was a big success. And before that, the seniors had their annual paint fight on the front lawn.
You can maybe see by my shoes.
Yeah, I'm still finding paint in my hair, so that's a blast. Our sports teams are doing great. This past week, the golf team had a win at their triangular meet. The JV women's cross country won their meet at Luther College in Decorah. So yeah, off to a great start. There's lots of good energy around, and I think a lot of students are excited about the school year.
Thank you, guys. And just for the record, I want to make sure I have Mary Kate Pug.
It's Pew.
Yeah. And yeah. Ari Collins.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Next, we'll hear from Liberty High. I believe it's Lauren Bolt. If I mispronounce your name, please just correct me when you get to the microphone. And Santiago Fajardo Casab. Thank you, guys.
All right, good evening. My name is Santi Fajardo.
And I'm Lauren Votes.
And we're here representing Liberty High School to give her update. So it's been a great return to the school year. There's a lot of school spirit around. Lots of stuff going on. Band has begun its rehearsals for this marching season. And in fact, in a couple weeks, we have our first competition over at Linmar. Show choir has also begun rehearsals recently, and 2 weeks ago we had our club fair where clubs across Liberty had little posters and presentations to try to get new members and get more students involved. The student body is very excited for the Liberty Homecoming Week, which is the week of September 19th, and we have a parade that Wednesday, and our actual dance is on the 24th, so we're very excited for that. School spirit is obviously on the rise following Liberty's successes at recent sporting events. and the atmosphere is just fantastic starting off the school year.
Yeah, so another thing we did as the start of the school year, we had a new student orientation, which was a really big success. We had 122 NHS members and upperclassmen. They're mentoring our 300 new freshmen who came to the building. We started with an assembly. We met, the students met with their lightning leaders who they see once a month during advisories. They went through their schedule, they toured the school, they did a scavenger hunt around the school, and really made the freshmen feel like they knew what they were doing and ready for the first day of school, so it kind of helped anxieties lower a little bit. So the new advisory program is also kicked off. So the 9th, 10th, 11th, and 12th grade with mentorship and culture, academic successes being the theme for 9th and 10th, and then for post-secondary planning for 11th and 12th graders, really focusing on things for college and what you need to be prepared. Yeah, you can talk about sports.
And just going back to fall sports, all 4 sports are on their way. We're very excited to have won the Kinnick game against City just last week. It was very, very exciting. And we also won our first home football game against Linn-Mar. In other sports news, Liberty volleyball team remains ranked #1 in the division. And there's also a lot of successes for the Liberty cross-country team and girls swimming, the combined Trojan Bolt team, a lot of successes for them as well. And Liberty boys golf has picked up a couple early season victories, so we're very excited. So thank you very much.
Great, thank you so much, guys. Next up, we have the student representative from Tate High. Is there a Tate High representative here? Okay. And last, we have the student representative from West High, Jayden Shin.
Hello, my name is Jayden Shin. I'm the representative from Iowa City West, and I want to start by thanking the administration for allowing the students to come here and speak about their respective schools, not only to improve the communication between the students and the administration, but also to foster like a sense of community around the Iowa City's community school district. And that's really one of the 4 values, the 4 principles we have at Iowa City West. That's kindness, community, learning, and our 4th principle, Mitch Gross. But on a serious note,
Stop laughing.
so one of the programs that we've started at West to really improve our community is the Heroes of Troy Award, where we recognize a member of staff that really fosters one of the 3 principles that we have at West and really makes students feel at home. So, for example, the first winner was our band teacher, who students said was comfortable sharing mistakes about his life, which in turn makes students feel comfortable about making mistakes in band practice. Our second winner was our secretary, Miss Overholt, which has been noted to introduce and greet students with a warm smile and make them feel at home. And our third winner was our Spanish teacher, when the student confronted with homophobia really took the time to defend the students and debunk or deconstruct homophobia within his classroom during his class time. And another program we've started at West is the attendance policy giveaway, where we recognize students with perfect attendance, and they're put in a raffle, and at the end of the week, we'll select one student to have a free lunch or dinner at a local business, not only with the hopes of promoting our local businesses, but also recognizing those students willing to learn. Now, with the social aspects, we have our homecoming coming up in 2 weeks, around September 24th, and we'll play City High for our homecoming game the day before. One of the ways we continuously try to improve is by surveys. We'll send out a survey last year about how we can improve our homecoming, and that's really been what we've basing our major changes on to really accommodate the students' perspective on what changes need to be made. Now, improving community does not happen only within the classroom at West High, also outside of the classroom. So one of the initiatives that our students have started is a standardized testing prep program, where students will volunteer to tutor other students for volunteer hours or just out of the kindness of their heart to really balance the inequalities when it comes to standardized testing. So that's SAT, ACT, and PSAT. A second policy that students have created is a gardening program, where students will go back to their alma mater to really teach elementary students about gardening, recycling, and being overall environmentally conscious. And lastly, what I'll touch on here is we're in the process of buying a mascot for our school, but it's taken some time because we're trying to be as inclusive as possible. And I think we've come to a decision of a Trojan that is truly representative of our schools across different backgrounds. So thank you.
Thank you, and thank you again to all of our student representatives for coming tonight. I know you've had a busy day at school. Thanks so much. Next up, we'll hear from ICA President Brady Schutt. Hi, Brady.
Hi. Thanks, President Malone and directors, Superintendent Degner. I'd first like to thank all of the folks in the community, to echo sort of Director Pilcher-Hayek's statements, all the folks in the community who applied to be on the board. I think that's we had such a strong slate of candidates. I think that's definitely a testament to the work that all of you do and also to the community's deep investment in public education. So I would encourage them also to consider running. It's it's a worthwhile endeavor. It's certainly intense, but we really appreciate everyone who does it. I'd also like to just say, of course, on behalf of ICEA, a special congratulations to Molly Abraham, our new director. I think those of us who know Molly, and I've known Molly a long time, can tell you that many people in our community and certainly in our district hold Molly with the highest regard, both professionally and personally. So Molly, I know, will be a fantastic director, and congratulations. My one last thing, some of you were on the negotiating team when this happened in 2019 in the spring. We negotiated a sick leave pool into the teacher's contract. And I'd just like to, again, sort of point out some of the value or some of the importance of the negotiating process and the things that we can do that are great for our folks. And we renewed that pool. We refreshed it this fall. I worked closely with HR, and I want to thank to Chase for being a part of that process. And within, just like happened the first time, within minutes, we had hundreds of days contributed. So much I have to sort of like monitor it, and then when I have to teach, I'm like, oh my gosh, we only wanted so many days, and I closed the form, and people were emailing me over the weekend and say, yeah, I'm gonna just put my days in there. I want to contribute. I'm like, okay, we have enough. So, but it's just, I think, great. It really has helped people when we've been able to use it, and I think it's just a strong statement about the power of negotiating and working together in a collaborative way. So, thank you.
Thank you. Next would be community comment, but I do not have any slip, and I will just double check. Okay. Moving on, we will need tonight's agenda approved. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
I move approval of the agenda for tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. And Director Abraham, how would you like to vote? Yes. Okay, thank you. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Great. Moving on to consent agenda. Before we do so, does any directors who reviewed the bills this cycle have any questions or comments related to that review? Okay. Are there any items that directors would wish to pull from the consent agenda?
I'd like to pull number 7.
Okay. Any other ones? Okay. Kim, sorry, jump ahead so much. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda minus item 7?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Director Abraham, how would you like to vote? Abstain. Abstain, okay. All votes have been cast, and the motion carries with Directors Clausen, Malone, Easton, Williams, Finch, and Pilcher-Hayek voting yea, and Director Abraham abstaining.
We will now dive into the consent agenda item that was pulled. Director Finch?
Thank you, President Malone. This item, I know several of us had some questions about it, and Superintendent Degner got back to us with an email explaining some of our questions, and so I thought I would pull it just so that, for the sake of transparency, so that you could verbalize for the public some of the things that you explained to us about these contracts.
Sure. Thanks, Director Finch. So with the 2 consulting contracts you have in front of you there, we really believe that'll help the district be more efficient and effective in our delivery model in these two areas. So Dwayne, on the operations side of the organization, our operations team has really shrunk over the last several years, and there's been quite a bit of turnover. So you would have recognized names in the past like Craig Hansel, David Duty, Dave McKenzie. We would have had 2 assistant directors under Director Barnes in the past. We don't have that right now. And so Jeff really runs the day-to-day portion of our operation, but we know that Dwayne has a skill set that's really unparalleled in the industry and in education, for that matter, to understand both of those worlds. So we're excited to continue to work with him and take advantage of his leadership and his capacity that he adds to our team in that effort for as long as he's available. I did provide in that information to you today that I do think the district will have to look at restructuring that part of our team when Dwayne isn't able to be with us anymore, because it's not really a sustainable model to move forward with the existing just full-time staff that we have. But we are able to take advantage of Dwayne's services and just know of his know-how of the district and then of the work he does. So that's the first agreement with Diane Schumacher, who recently retired from us. We're excited to also partner with Diane to provide some work around the state's mentoring process and performance review process, and Diane's assistance with that. There's some particular advantages to using somebody from outside of the system to provide that work and to be able to do that mentoring aspect for us. And then also as we onboard Carmen and Eliza to their new roles, that's a big learning curve in that office. That office isn't just curriculum and instruction or teaching and learning. There's also budget responsibilities, state reporting responsibilities, understanding Iowa code in Chapter 12. And so Diane also has a depth of knowledge there that we see as this a transitional opportunity, but then also that first aspect I talked about with also being able to provide that mentoring support and also some support around the statewide evaluation process.
Great. Thank you, Superintendent Degner. Are there any additional questions or further discussion from other board members?
No, that answers all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the consultant agreements?
I move that we approve item 7, consulting agreements for Dwayne Van Hemert and Diane Schumacher.
I second.
Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Director Abraham, how would you like to vote? Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you. Next, we'll turn over the meeting or mic to Vice President Williams for the public hearing.
Now, excuse me, now is the time and place for the public hearing on the district's proposed conveyance of a drainage and trail easement at Northwest Junior High with legal descriptions provided in the attached documentation. Notice of the public hearing was published in the Iowa City Press Citizen on August 29th, 2022. Are there any questions from the board? Are there any questions from the public?
Thank you, Vice President Williams. I will close that public hearing and we will move on to the class size update RAM data presentation. Superintendent Degner, will that be you or a member of our administration team?
Yeah, I'm going to turn it over to Amy here, but we just wanted to highlight that typically in the fall, as we start school, we provide you guys a class size update. We look at our elementary numbers that we know are based on our RAM model that they're going to talk to you a lot about this evening, and then our secondary class sizes. I think you'll hear from Amy later, but I'll just reiterate it here from the onset that remember we've had an influx of FTE into our system the last 2 years with our ESSER dollars, and that won't be our reality as we move forward, that there is a number of FTE that you're going to see in the system here this evening that we are going to have to look at how we try to slim our budget through some attrition possibilities here this spring and to make ourselves more economical and keep our budget in line. So they're going to go through some class size data, but Director Eastham has been good about asking the question around how this has affected our academic outcomes, and so they also have some information for you there with growth data that shows how the RAM has impacted our students' academic outcomes.
Thank you, Matt. So I'm going to take the elementary RAM information. Lucas is going to talk about the secondary course information, and then Eliza and I will both speak to the FAST data. So the document that you have in front of you, the elementary RAM, is probably one that looks quite familiar to you. This snapshot was taken from August 17th. and that's the day that we made slight staffing adjustments. It shows that we have 349 classroom teachers deployed across our 22 elementary schools. And of note, like Matt alluded to, that is a decrease in the number of sections that we had deployed last year. We were at 370.5 in the system, and we're able to do that with the increase with the ESSER dollars. This year, we knew we needed to start backing away a little bit and didn't have the infusion of ESSER dollars, and so we moved our buildings from RAM level 1 through 4 into RAM levels 2 through 5. Now, not everybody's RAM changed. You can kind of see from what happened from last year to this year how many changed. The majority of the buildings did change levels. Let's see. We made that, so in the spring, we staffed at 355 with our projections, our roll-up, our crystal ball, our best crystal ball, but you can see that we deployed 349 across the system. That did not mean that we had to let go of 5 or 6 teachers at the time. We had a few unfilled positions, and we're able to work that out, and we did have to move a couple of teachers during that time. The thing I would remind everybody about is that our RAM policy is based on board policy 606.1, and we look at that board policy as static unless, of course, you come together and ask us to change those class sizes. But that our placement of schools is dynamic each year, and that's really dependent on the budget. And so as we are thinking about next year, you can see that we've already taken a step to reduce the number of FTE that we thought we would need to deploy this fall by going from 355 to 349. And that's with even with less infusion of ESSER dollars, but that's due to not as many students showing up, right, when we needed to deploy 6 less teachers from what we anticipated in the fall. So thinking through that, and also knowing that we're coming towards the end of ESSER dollars, I just want to prepare everybody for the potential need or a strong need to think about moving to RAM levels 3 through 5 to situate our buildings in next year as a strong possibility. We sat in RAM levels 3 through 5, I believe, last during the 18-19 school year. Please don't quote me on that. I'd have to go look for sure, but it hasn't been too far in the recent past. So with that, I'd take any questions around elementary staffing.
Are there any questions?
I don't know. I'm not sure what else you're preparing, so I don't know when to ask questions, so I'm just gonna listen and maybe we'll go back to it.
Yeah, no, that's all I had for elementary staffing at the time.
Okay. It's a lot of information.
It is.
So let me just make sure I don't have any questions. So if we go from 2 to 5 to 3 to 5 is what you're anticipating we might have to do.
Yeah.
And right now, we have no level 1 because of funding. Now we're 2 to 5.
Right.
So I see that. I thought these were really helpful, the way you set it up so that you can compare 21, 22 to 22, 23.
Thank you.
So thanks for doing that. And then I guess what my question would be, that's the data, so what is your interpretation of it?
Yeah, my interpretation is that we're down students, and our count date's coming up on October 1st. I think Adam and Chase have been working with a demographer that is going to show some slower growth as well. I don't want to steal their thunder. But I think between the ESSER dollars that we are coming to the end of, as well as seeing not as many students as we anticipated in the roll-up, I think we're going to need to be really careful with our staffing for next year.
That's helpful. It's nice to hear your interpretation of things, because obviously you have a better feel for all of this than we do. So thank you.
Thank you.
And to anticipate a bit, Amy, as we look towards decreasing of staff, teachers, in the coming years, I think we will also be wanting to look carefully at the other parts of this presentation, which are academic outcomes for different RAM categories.
Absolutely. Yep.
Okay.
All right. Well, I will thank you, Ruthina. Sorry. I'll turn it over to Lucas now for the secondary report.
excuse me. Thank you, Amy. Just looking at a couple different things, obviously, you can see from the board docs, taking a look at a few different items with the junior high and high schools, both the number of sections, the course enrollments, but then also looking at the median class size, which is different than how we've looked at it in the past. And that's due to kind of the influx or the smaller or the larger class sizes, which don't often depict what the average class size could be overall. So one of the things that I would like to be mindful of, even though the class sizes do look pretty manageable there, looking specifically at English language arts, that is referencing both the required and the elective classes. So, while the numbers look, again, in the upper 20s, fairly manageable for a teacher, we do in our monitoring how those class sizes look, in particular with our English 9 or English 10, which sometimes those class sizes that we see right now are a little bit larger. So again, willing to take any questions, but again, I do want to highlight the fact that we're looking at median class sizes here compared to the average overall.
I don't have any questions, but to the point that you were making, maybe in the future, if there's a way to get some data, because I know how much those tiny classes and big classes skew the class size. If we could get a breakout or a pullout of, the required classes, right? Like freshman English, world history, what those kind of, and what those class sizes look like. I think that might give us a truer or a better understanding of, are we seeing 41 kids in a AP US history class, which would be concerning, or are those kind of core classes where they should be with staffing? Because as you noted, it's hard to take the data at too much face value, knowing all of the highs and lows that impact it.
Back, if you all might remember, in January with an enrollment and demographics report that typically we've provided some ranges. Now, I don't know if it's to the depth of what you're asking for, Lisa, but we can certainly do that in our January report as well.
Yeah, it's just any way to cut out kind of those specialized classes. And I know that I like what we have on here. I think it's a move in the right direction. But the more data we can get, the more detailed data always helps us make better informed decisions. Thanks, guys.
If we could just back up for a moment, and I knew I was forgetting something, but about the elementary data. So if we're, if we may have to move from, we've already moved from 1 to 2, and then we may have to move to 3, and again, it's because of funding. I just think one of the interpretations I have of the data you provided is we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 schools that have over 60% FRL. So I think that's something, and then we have a few more that are over 50% FRL. And, the history of this district, we've worked really hard over the last 10 years to figure out how to mitigate the challenges that disparate FRL pose. And it's going to become even more important that we look at that as we are unable to provide the level of RAM that we wish we could. So to me, it's startling to think of schools that have 70 plus FRL, 60 plus FRL, having to, the best thing we did was try to do RAM, right? And now we can't do that as much as we wish we could. So it's something we're gonna have to really look at and see what we can do about it. Maybe nothing, because it's funding, but something we should all keep our eye on.
Thank you for bringing that up, Director Hyatt. Just looking at the state of our economy as a county, I think we will see those numbers increase for a lot of our schools. So I think we're going to be in a position where we're going to have to figure out what's going to work with the amount of resources that we have, because will be more people in need that will impact these numbers that we see in front of us.
Certainly.
Combine the data, this is great how much noise that makes when I move it. Hope everybody likes that. When you look at the data you provided that has the elementary and the secondary, so this goes along with what I was just saying, the projection of what our FRLs will be in 2 of our high schools, they could be 50%. And so again, in the other high school, the other traditional high school will have something like 20%. So again, as we are looking at the disparity between our feeder schools, we are going to have to consider what to do in the long run and short run with the elementary disparities when funds are tight and tighter, and the secondary disparities. And I understand that RAM applies to elementaries, but I wonder what we can do, because those same kids go to junior high. And our junior high numbers are also going to be troublesome, our FRL numbers in our junior highs. And there's only a difference of 3 months. It's the summer, so we're going to have the same kids and the same challenges there. So I'd like for us to think about solutions and approaches to making sure that we're still looking at the population of FRL. And again, I think everyone in this room knows that the reason I talk about that is because the research shows that there is a number that you hope to be below to avoid challenges that are going to be very difficult to meet. So again, if there's a way this district can start thinking about it, how we can not just work on RAM in our elementary, but find ways to mitigate those disparities in our secondary. I hope that's something we can keep our eye on and be creative about.
That brings up a really good point, Director Pilcher-Hayek. Because for us, RAM at the elementary is class size, and that's one piece of information. But there is a very big difference between a 200-kid school and a 600-kid school. And class size RAM doesn't do anything about that. And that, I think, gets at the secondary question, too, is that sometimes what you need is maybe a difference in administrative support or these other supports, student family advocates, some of these folks that don't fit into this formula necessarily. But those are the needs that come up, because at the secondary level, class size, it means something, but it's so different all over the place. And to lower the average class size, you have to hire a whole bunch of teachers, because you have to hit all those core areas. But those additional supports, those people that, so if kids are having obstacles and the kinds of obstacles kids are having, well, who helps support that? A lot of times, the classroom teacher does less of that at the secondary level, and it might be more of your support staff and your SFAs, or how your guidance office works, or if it's the NEST program and how we staff that. But I think sometimes when we're getting creative, it's easy to look at class size, but I think we miss a lot of information when we only look at class size, because that doesn't change. If you're a principal at, someone who's coming up on 650 kids, and another principal has 250, that's just that's a whole, and so I think if we can start to account for some of that, and like I say, get creative, because it isn't just classroom teachers, right? We have these folks in support roles that end up doing a ton of work, and they can be a lot more flexible. And so I think just as we think about that, like how are we staffing those other roles outside of kind of class size data, which is just that one piece of it.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point, Director Clausen. And that's a principle we've somewhat applied to our secondary schools before with classified staffing. So when you think about like supervisory para hours or secretary hours, I know you mentioned family student advocates. There's some support positions like you're talking about that become especially critical, and you just need more of those potentially when you're serving more structurally disadvantaged families and students, right? And so I think that is a good solution for us to take back and look at, okay, when was the last time we looked at those numbers? Are we still allocating out those hours? It does become a resource issue, to Director Pilcher-Hayek's point, right? I mean, sometimes we're not able to be as aggressive as we'd like to with the deploying of those resources according to even RAM principles at the secondary level. But I do think that's another interesting lens to look at, that it's maybe not as much around class size there as it is some of those support positions, and are we, well enough equipped in some of those spaces to do that? So we'll make a note of that and definitely bring that back, yeah.
I would say we're going to go to the middle school model, and so we're going to have fifth graders, and that would be maybe a good time, an opportunity to think about how we're going to, and whether we're going to still use any kind of RAM when we're looking at fifth graders, because middle school kids are still pretty young. I mean, and it's hard. Class size, it's great if you can have a smaller class, right? So that's going to be a good opportunity for us to think about it, because all of a sudden we've got fifth, sixth, and fifth. What am I saying?
Sixth,
Sixth, seventh, and eighth is what I meant to say. So looking at that, pulling the sixth that used to have RAM and then not having RAM, or will there be a creative solution where we could have RAM for 6, 7, and 8?
It's an interesting discussion. I wonder, Matt, if, and maybe the board too, I think I've heard suggestions for perhaps changing the way we're allocating teachers and support personnel. And if that's where we're going, I would like to have the opportunity to have a thorough discussion and understanding of what our options actually are. Les will be a little bit more generous with his ending year balance projections, perhaps. But look at our, give us a chance to look at, to contemplate what our options are. Sure. And not to criticize, but I think in the past I've had personally a little trouble doing that in the way we've proceeded for the last couple of 3 years in terms of approving staff allocations.
Yeah, I think to kind of just both the things you guys are talking about there, we are looking at some of those things as we look at our middle school approach and some of the things we'll do there. You'll probably hear me bring that back up in agenda setting, that at some point, I don't think the next meeting or even maybe this next month, but soon here in the fall, we are going to need to have that middle school delivery model conversation with you all. So I think the staffing element is an important one in that, knowing that we're also in not a resource-rich environment right now. But I do think looking at where we can make some with the resources we have, are they deployed in all the right spots, right? And I don't, that's a tough conversation for our buildings because none of them feel like they're overstaffed. But at the same time, when we know that number's somewhat fixed, you know, are we being as smart as we can be and as nimble as we can be in our approach? So I do think that'd be a good thing for us to bring back, Charlie, and to talk about, okay, what are these, you know, to what Director Pilcher-Hayek was talking about before, what are the solutions or potential strategies we could at least consider from a staffing model, and what's the financial impact to those, and then what room do we have to do any of those or not do those? Amy was talking about RAM level 3 through 5, 2 through 5, you know, felt good, but we were in 3 through 5 right before COVID hit. And that was part of our reality because of where we were coming off a budget cut year. And so some of these things are some return to normal. Some of it's going to be don't do normal just like we did it before, and try to look for new opportunities as well.
Great.
All right, I think it's time to move over to then the fast growth documents here. And tonight we're displaying our data a little bit different. So if you remember when Diane Schumacher had shared some documents with you in the past, we had shared out typically proficiency rates by RAM level, but then we did add some growth measures in there. And what we saw a few years back is pretty indicative of what we're still seeing now. And that is, by and large, when our buildings are staffed with lower class sizes, we are reaping the benefits of that. We can't say it in every statistic and every assessment that we give for every grade or demographic group, but by and large, if you've combed through those 5 documents, there is a good indication there that our lower class sizes are having greater impact. So as I worked with Austin Wells on these documents, and these charts are, of course, the data from last year.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Deputy Superintendent Kortmeyer. Can you just get a little bit
Sure.
closer?
Thank you for that, Ruthina. So these charts show the 21-22 fast reading and math data from fall to spring and the growth percentile. We haven't, again, brought growth percentile to you in the past, so we're trying something new, and we think it's an important indicator to look at. So you likely will see us continue to bring growth to you in different capacities here. But this makes the assumption then that growth percentile by START scores, that the national average growth percentile would be 50th percentile. So a student that falls below that is underperforming according to their peer group who scored that particular score on the assessment, and a student above that would be outperforming their peer group. So there's 5 documents in here. We've got one for grade level, one for English language learners, one for our students receiving special education supports, one for our students that are on free or reduced price lunches, and one broken out by race and ethnicity. I would say if you just were looking at the grade level document, with the reading, and I'm thinking about the piece that we report back to the state, and that's early reading and the CBM reading. 5 of our 7 grades.
Amy, sorry to interrupt. Just want to make sure we're all on the same page here. So we're looking at the fast growth by RAM level, grade level PDF.
Grade level, yep.
Okay, and try to help me. It's hard for me to read these. So,
Sure.
So take your time with it because
Okay.
it's a little bit tricky for me to understand this. And
Okay.
I did study it. I just still don't quite
Yeah.
get it.
So thank you for that, Maka. So on the very left side, you have the schools situated in their RAMs, how they were situated last year. Then at the kind of the top left there, you've got the N, so the total number of students that would have been in those grades, and then by RAM level. And then you have the 5 assessments that we give our kiddos. So early reading, which is kind of at the bottom left corner there, and then CBM reading, which is in the middle towards the top. Those are the 2 tests that we have shared with the state that we give as our universal screener 3 times a year for reading. Early math and A math, we do not have to share with the state what we're using there as universal screeners, but we give those, of course, to monitor proficiency and then to provide interventions for students who are not proficient. Then the A reading is another measure that we like to give. It gives us just a little bit different look for our kiddos, so we also have been given that. You can see that with early reading, that's a K1 test. With CBM reading, that's our 2-6 test for reading. Early math is K1, and then A math is 2-6, and A reading is 2-6. So as I look across there, and I'm just considering the assessment that we share with the state that we use as our universal screener, so early reading and CBM reading are what we report to the state. 5 of those 7 grade levels, so kindergarten, 2nd, 3rd, 5th, and 6th, if you're situated in that lowest RAM level, you also have the top average growth percentiles happening in comparison to those other RAM levels. So 5 of the 7 grades. Does that make sense?
Do that last part again, please.
Yeah.
So take one. So you're taking early reading.
Yep.
Walk me through that one, just
Sure.
with one line, so that I can really make sure I understand what you're saying.
Sure. So if you look at early reading under kindergarten, RAM level 1, you see it. I think that's a 49 there, right?
Yeah.
So if you look through the rest of the list with how RAM 3 performed versus 4 versus 5, you see 41, 49, and 30. So you have kind of a tie there with what happened with RAM level 1 and RAM level 4 schools, right? So move on to first grade then. The 43 in RAM level 1 wasn't the highest in that category. You had some other RAM levels outperforming there, right? The growth percentile. But now bump up to CBM reading and look at...
Amy, I'm sorry to
Yep.
interrupt. Maka's showing me how here. Can you just tell me what the scores actually are?
Yep.
I know you.
So these...
What does score 49 mean on
Yep,
early
so
reading skill?
that's the growth percentile. So that's not a proficiency rate and it's not a score on the test. What FAST has said is that if students are performing at the 50th percentile, their scores moving from the fall testing period to the spring testing period, if they are meeting average growth with all kids that have been in their norming process in the past, they would score at the 50th percentile. So what we'd want to see across all of these pages is 50 everywhere. We'd want to see 50. That means that they're hitting what the average kiddo would hit. If they're above it, yay, but if they're below it, they're underperforming what they've seen nationally as growth during that time. Adam and I were having a conversation earlier, because lots of times, particularly with Iowa assessments and other assessments, we like to think of growth as 1 year's time. We have to be careful that in this situation, it doesn't necessarily mean it's 1 year's time. It's what they've seen nationally happen with this test. And so for one group, it might mean that they grew past a year. For another group, and for another particular standard score, it could be a little bit less. But by and large, what this says is it tells us how the kids are performing across, according to their peer group, for how they performed initially on that assessment. Did they grow like the average kid grew? So when you're seeing the 50, that's where we want to be. So what it's saying, I'm going to move up to the CBM reading then. You see that you have grades 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 across the top, and you have your RAM levels down the left side. So in RAM 1 for grade 2, They performed at the, on average, 60, the score was at the 60th percentile. So they're outperforming their peers nationally, right? Just like the RAM Level 3 was, RAM Level 4 was, RAM Level 5 was underperforming a little bit. But you see that 60 in RAM Level 1 was at or was near the top and shared kind of that prized possession of being at the top with RAM Level 3. If you move over to third grade, then you see that average score, gross score, outperformed RAM Level 3, 4, and 5. Same with grade 5 there, and same with grade 6. Now, just a few things to think about. When our kiddo, we're not talking proficiency rates here either, but what I could share just typically that what we see happening is our schools that are situated in RAM Level 1 are typically a lot less proficient than our kids in the higher RAM levels, right? So they have more room to grow, for sure. But again, the question is, for us, is as we look through these documents, is the policy having the impact that we want to see? And I think as you move through these documents, the answer is yes. And so that goes back to our earlier conversation of, well, what do we do then when money gets tighter, right? When I looked at math wasn't telling me the same thing, at least grade level rise. I could see 2 of the 7 grades in early math and A math, and that was first grade and 6th grade. They were outperforming the other RAM levels in the first RAM level, right? I'm just going to point out a couple of other things, and then I'm going to have Eliza add some things here. I think the other 2 documents that are just stark and amazing to look at are our free and reduced price lunch document, as well as our document that talks about our students that are receiving special education supports. Because in every category, in every assessment, the RAM Level 1 schools' growth outperformed the other RAM levels. So it's pretty amazing there. All right, I'll have Eliza share a few tidbits, and then we'll take some questions.
That was a great explanation. I totally understand how to read it now. Yeah.
Well, good, because it took us a long time of re-explaining it to ourselves to make sure that we could iterate it back to you guys. So just in summary, we were super pleased to see that the efforts that we have put forth with the RAM and allocating resources, that sitting as a building principal for the last 8 years in our district, I always fell at the top of that RAM, and sometimes I would be like, my goodness, it is still hard. I still have 400 students, and I would love to have class sizes, in the smaller RAM. But looking overall as a system, this is what we're doing to support and to provide an equitable education to all of our students in Iowa City School District. And so it was exciting to see that this data supports all the efforts that we go into with the policy making and with the decisions that we have to do to move staff and to allocate them appropriately. Another finding that just looking through these graphs showed us was we were also seeing in grades 5 and 6, we were seeing a lot of the growth in that RAM Level 1 as well. And so if we think about our RAM, we know that as we get into our upper grades, they are a little bit larger just in nature. And so that was just another interesting tidbit that we found, that as those classes got larger, in the 5th and 6th grade, we did see that growth continue for our RAM Level 1. And so overall, it was good data to see, and we understand that the RAM has big impacts, and it's important for us to think about, but with our true mission to providing an equitable education to all students, it is certainly serving that purpose. So thanks for letting us pull that. It was great to be able to share.
I wonder if there's a way to combine this data with the proficiency data and do a master overlay, because on one hand, when we look at this in isolation, just this data, when we see, oh, well, for the most part, it's our RAM Level 5 schools that are underperforming anticipated growth. Wow, that's concerning. Do we need to provide more supports? But then if we look at proficiency data and say, oh no, those RAM Level 5 schools are traditionally at 86% proficiency, well above the national or state average, so we don't need to be concerned that they're underperforming. And then the flip of that, of course, is us saying, oh, great, our RAM Level 1 schools are doing lots of learning above the national average. So everything is fine and working there, but then we look at proficiency, and it's kind of what you said, if you have a big gap, then there's lots of room to start growing, which is great. We're definitely moving in the right direction. But if there's a way to kind of overlay the data to get a picture of, is this concerning? Are there causes for celebration? Again, I think that'll give us a better way to interpret the big picture of what's going on up here.
And just to be clear, the only RAM Level 5 schools is the online program, correct? Is that
For
that
this
correct?
year, no. For last year, yes.
For last, but the data that we're looking at.
Oh, yeah.
Okay,
Yes. Yep,
thank you.
You're
Okay.
right.
Just wanted to make sure we had that point.
Yeah, oh, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, Lisa, I think that's an excellent point with what we want to do to eventually continue this conversation around the strategic plan, that we really have to look at 3 different areas, right? We have to look at proficiency, we have to look at growth, and then we have to look at gap closure. And so I think as we, whenever we're able to get together for a retreat and talk about some of those things, I think that's an important element for us to consider is, okay, how are we laying that data over top of each other, like you said, to know that, okay, we're making good growth. Are we getting kids to proficiency? Or some schools already seeing high rates of proficiency? That might explain what some of the indicators we're seeing around growth are. So it only tells part of the story. You're exactly right. The growth is only part of the story. We were excited to talk about growth tonight because that's one thing we haven't done a lot with you guys. We've always talked about proficiency, and then it's like you've made it or you haven't. And so it's about then I think our next step is bringing that all together for everybody.
And I think there are a lot of really exciting opportunities for this data, especially if our data people can mine it down by building. Because if we can find RAM, one building that's showing amazing growth and amazing proficiency, as we look at all of these budget cuts, and this is kind of to JP's point of, we're not going to be able to have small classes. What support is that building? What are they doing that makes their proficiency and their growth growing so fast and well and great? And can we replicate that at other buildings across the RAM levels in a cost-efficient way? I think that there's some really, hopefully, cool things that we can do with all of this data.
Yeah, and Lisa, I think that's the way to analyze building-to-building comparisons, which I believe we actually have to start doing, is looking at what buildings are doing well and looking at extrapolating that if we can, and not looking at what buildings are not doing so well. It's not, looking at building to building is not a way of criticizing buildings. It's trying to figure out what we are doing well, then expanding with that.
Does this building have a second SFA?
Yeah.
And is that contributing to these do they have a dedicated mental health? Does the elementary school have a nest type environment? And that's what's making, what's different, and can we expand it?
And I think you do provide that data building to building in the spring related to proficiency. I know we've seen it before. I can't remember. Yeah.
We've also provided that, not building to building necessarily, but in the annual progress report and those teaching and learning director reports that come up in November, you'll see the proficiency. I asked Matt when I loaded these into board docs, I said, I wonder if there's also going to see proficiency along with this. So I kind of anticipated that you might as well. But we can have more discussion about building.
I told her,
building
no,
as well.
don't worry about it. We'll just do growth. So.
Bad move, Matt. No, just joking.
Yeah, exactly. Got that one
because
wrong.
I think it is important for us to see that proficiency along with growth, because the growth should be celebrated and encouraged, and our families should see this number and be excited about that. But I think it's also important to see where the proficiency is happening at the same time.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm just excited. This is one of the only time we've seen growth data. And so it's exciting because that's what I'm interested in, because if we want kids to advance, one way, because I think building to building is one thing, but the truth is there's probably a lot of variation within the buildings from classroom to classroom. And so this is why I'm still excited, right, about having a guaranteed and viable curriculum for every kid and common assessments, right? So through the HRS model, then we can make those comparisons, and we're comparing apples to apples, and we can drill down further, and I know you guys are doing this, but just, for the public to know, we can drill down classroom to classroom and find out where there is success. Then we're going to take that teacher and that program and help these other folks that aren't experiencing that within buildings, because the true story probably that the variation isn't building to building as much as it is within buildings. And we're not going to see that data, and that's fine, right? We don't need to publicly digest all that. But just knowing you folks are looking at that it's classroom to classroom and teacher to teacher, because that's really why is this building growth? The teachers in that building are why. And they need the supports, they need the SFAs, but at the end of the day, it's really that teacher in the classroom that makes the difference. And finding those effective practices and helping our folks who maybe haven't reached that or need that support to get there, and doing that, I mean, that is what HRS is about. And the more we have these common assessments, it's exciting. And if we can get it right now, we'll have an overlay, I'm sure. You guys are great with the graphs and the color coding to have proficiency and growth so we can tell this full story. It's exciting that this is the first time we're telling this part of the story. That's always been a part of the story, but now we're able to put it out, to tell it, and then put those things together. It just helps us make better decisions, and at the end of the day, it's going to help our folks get better at being better for our kids.
Yeah, I love where you're going with that, JP, because that's exactly the next part of the work, right? Is that we know the variable is the teacher in the classroom, right? I mean, that's the variable. And so the highest impact we can have is have great teachers in every classroom. And that's what we pride ourselves on, and that's what we want to continue to invest in. And then when we find those highly effective teaching practices, it's about replicating that, right? And making sure that every kid is getting access to those highly effective practices. So honestly, the RAM gives us a chance for our teachers to be successful in some of those environments and to do those highly effective practices, but the real work is making sure we're using the highest leverage practices, because you guys have heard me say before, most of the things we do work, but we have to find the things that matter the most, that work, that are the most effective things, and commit to those practices, because we don't have time to spend on things that have fringe benefits or maybe some positive impact. It has to have the most impact for our kids. So I think that's exactly where this conversation will go, and then give us a tool. The school improvement framework through HRS gives us a tool to evaluate, again, what's working, what's not, to Charlie's point about that's what we need to zero in on.
Are there any more questions or items for discussion for Amy, Eliza, and Lucas? Sorry. Blanking on names. Could not go by.
You're so close.
All right. We'll move on to the equity update from Janet and the Ombuds Annual Progress Report.
Yeah, so Janet's been in to meet with you guys a couple times before, and the last time we asked for your approval for charter, which we were able to get from you guys, and now she's going to report. This will be an annual report that we provide about data that she saw in her office. I think you'll hear her probably reiterate this, but I think from just awareness perspective, I'd say Janet and I have talked about it's a small sample size, and so we don't want to react too quickly to some of the things we see, but also at the same time, there's certain things we're paying attention to, and certain things that she shared with us from a leadership team perspective. We know that we also either need to pay attention to, or we need to help try to facilitate some change on, because she's seeing that issue repeatedly. So without saying too much, I'll let Janet get going and walk you through her report here this evening.
Thank you, Matt. All right, thank you for this opportunity to speak on the Ombuds Office Annual Report. I'm gonna switch over here to make sure everyone can see me. I am vertically challenged, so I'm trying to be on my tippy toes here. All right. So I wanted to make sure that it's kept in mind that the annual report I'll be presenting and speaking on is meant to provide a high-level overview of the activity that came through my office in the past year, while also being very mindful of preserving the confidentiality of the Ombuds office, specifically those individuals, the identity of those individuals coming through the office. So I will focus on data methodology. How did I analyze this data? Then we'll go into some data points from the past year, and then we'll go into my strategic goals for the upcoming year going forward. So I start off, I'm going to essentially walk you through the annual report. I'm going to go quite quickly through the slides so as to maximize the time for questions and comments afterwards, as you've all likely had some time to review and go through the annual report. So essentially I'm going to walk you through. I start off the annual report, if you're flipping through that on your computers, with a note from the Ombuds, where I go through and state my what, my how, and my why. So I mentioned my overarching goal, my priority when I first started my position of building trust and building relationships, as well as establishing that credibility and integrity of my office. I then go into how I went about trying to accomplish that. So focusing on providing high quality customer service, researching and implementing best practices, and promoting awareness of the Ombuds office. I also talk about why I truly enjoy my role. It's an extremely rewarding role, as you can imagine. What I truly enjoy most is that opportunity to directly connect one-on-one with district constituents, whether it's parent guardians, students, or staff. So following a note from the Ombuds, you'll see some general information, which I think is very important to provide in order to understand the role of the Ombuds office, but also understand the data that I provide in the annual report. So the Ombuds purpose, the core values, the guiding principles of independence, informality, impartiality, and confidence, the Ombuds processes, and also the visitor options. So how did I go about analyzing this data? Once I started my position, I started tracking those concerns that were coming through my office. And as a reminder, I began my position August 2nd, 2021, and began taking concerns as of October 1st, 2021. So it took about 2 months to get my feet wet, research best practices, and began taking those concerns. So the data you'll see is data that I started recording as of October 1st, 2021. So I decided to utilize 10 total reporting categories, 9 of which were from the International Ombuds Association uniform reporting categories. And I'll see if I can pull those up quickly here. So if you just, I'm just going to try to Google the uniform reporting categories. So if you just do this, you'll see the first link that comes up. This shows a description of the uniform reporting categories that are encouraged for all ombuds like myself to use in classifying concerns and creating an annual report. You'll see a description of each of those categories along with subcategories that allow for more fine-tuned, detailed categorization of those concerns. There's anywhere from 5 to 19 subcategories, as you can see. So jump back here. So those are the categories that I utilized. Those are the 9 from the IOA, and I added a category of constituent relationships. That is to capture concerns or questions arising between parent guardians, families, students, and the school or the district. So just wanted to provide that information on how I began analyzing the data. Here's the full list of the 10 reporting categories that I utilized. And a bit more information. So I reviewed data from July 1st, 2021 to June 30th, 2022 using fiscal year cutoff dates. So I received 100 total contacts in that time frame. Fortunately, a very round number, easy to look at that data. I'm not sure how I ended up that lucky, but great number to end out that past year. So 100 total contacts received, but 138 total topics of concern. That's to mean that each individual or contact that came through my office could have resulted in bringing forth more than one concern. So anywhere from 1 to 3 concerns were recorded for any of those 100 contacts. And then also I implemented an Ombuds feedback survey, which received 25, so a quarter of those contacts received responses on that survey. So getting into the data, a few things to remember before I get into the data itself. A reminder, when we look at this data, and we're thinking about the data, that my office is very much an informal supplemental resource. So what you're looking at, I use the catch-all term of concerns, right? So that could mean a simple question about a district policy or process. It could mean a request for a referral to community resource, a district resource, request to for how to contact a district resource, in addition to just concerns. So want to make sure that when you're looking at this information that you're not seeing them as the level of formal complaints, but as concerns that came through my office. So looking at context by month, you'll see when I first started receiving concerns, it was at a higher level of 12, and then it decreased in the winter holiday months from November through January, but then increased and remained steady from February through the end of the school year. For context by trimester, that you can see this information broken down a bit differently for those 100 contacts. Again, taking into account that I only began in October of that first trimester, they did increase, the contacts increased each trimester. So a projection there. So the initial contacts of my office were predominantly made via email at 71%, followed by phone. The types of visitors coming through my office were predominantly employees at 61%, followed by parent guardians at 36%. And then each concern that came through my office was classified as a primary concern of education or employment. So that predominantly was education-related concerns at 56%. So looking at that education level and employment level of concerns a bit more closely in the next few graphs, you'll see that for by level, those 77 contacts out of the 138 concerns predominantly were at the elementary level, followed by high school. Looking at employment-based concerns by level, 41% were predominantly received from a district office or based at a district office, followed by elementary. So looking at the top categories of concerns for education and employment. So for education-based concerns, the top categories are as follows. You'll see that the top 3 were service administrative issues, followed by constituent relationships, and then legal, regulatory, financial, and compliance. For employment, you'll see the top categories of concerns are as follows. The top 3 being evaluative relationships, peer and colleague relationships, and then career progression and development. Now, this is where I provide a bit more information and I utilize those subcategories. So it breaks it down even further, and it's quite helpful to understand what types of concerns came through my office. So, for example, if we're looking at education-related concerns, those subcategories you can see as follows. So here are the top 3 main reporting categories. The top 1 being service administrative issues. You can think of that being very customer service based. So you can see that 35% of those concerns were that category. So 27 out of 77. What made up those 27? That's where these subcategories can be very helpful in understanding. So 11 of those 27 were administrative decisions and interpretation / application of rules. 8 were behavior of service providers, 7 were categorized as quality of services, etc. And that same detail is provided for each of those top categories. So for employment, you'll see that same subcategory detail as well. So for example, that top category of evaluative relationships, 23, how did that break down with the subcategories? So 5 were departmental climate, supervisory effectiveness, questions or concerns, communication, etc. And that same detail provided for peer and colleague relationships as well as career progression and development. So going into the survey results, who submitted responses to the survey? So 15 were employee respondents and 10 were parent guardian respondents. And how did these 25 learn about the Ombuds office? Predominantly by staff referral or ICCSD communication, whether it was via district-wide email or communication sent through the phone apps. And one of the two most important questions in the survey are as follows. So if you had not contacted the Ombuds for assistance, what might have these 25 respondents done instead? Predominantly listing that they might have done nothing, remain unsatisfied, might have addressed directly through a formal channel within the district, moved forward potentially with filing a lawsuit or a formal complaint, or attempting to leave and separate themselves from the district altogether. And for this question, what was the result of the communication with the Ombuds office? Result of reaching out, predominantly providing conflict resolution best practices, the Ombuds becoming directly involved, whether it's providing informal mediation, making sure they got information needed to address their concern, or receiving clarification and information on a district policy or process. So we did receive some positive comments through the survey results. Their last question of the survey was an open response, and these are a sampling of some of those positive comments that I received through the survey. Those themes of these positive comments are feeling that their voice was heard, appreciating the neutrality of the office, as well as the value of opening up communication between parties. Also received some great constructive feedback via the survey as well. So a desire for more of a structured follow-up process. So for example, after the close of a concern or close of helping a visitor, checking in, wanting more of a check-in process. So within 2 weeks or a few weeks after the close of a concern, checking in, is there anything I can do to be of any further assistance? Please reach out if you'd like to schedule any follow-up meetings for further assistance or if you have any further questions. So that's something I'll be implementing in the coming year and putting into place. Also, constructive feedback, expressing a desire for making sure there's very clear explanation of the Ombuds processes, potentially how much time the process may take. For example, how long will an informal mediation take of someone's time? And then desire for very clear explanation of the Ombuds role, making sure that in that initial meeting with each visitor, I'm being very clear about what it is that is within my role and what is not within my role. So all of that information is what I used in creating the strategic goals for this coming year and going forward. I also keep in mind, the organization's overall goals as well. So for example, with high reliability schools, certainly part of that philosophy is having that unified effort, and I need to be part of that unified effort. So I very much see my office contributing to high reliability schools level 1, which is providing that safe, collaborative culture. So that was certainly something I considered in creating these strategic goals going forward of providing high quality customer service, researching and implementing best practices for the Ombuds office processes and procedures as a newer office, promoting awareness, continuing to promote awareness of the Ombuds office services, providing education and outreach on informal resolution process, leading to that collaborative culture, and providing upward feedback, continuing to do that so as to result in continuous improvement and promote continuous improvement within the organization. So in closing, some things to remember in reviewing this data in the annual report. The data is only inclusive of the visitors that came through the Ombuds office. That's all that I could provide data on, and that's all that I could speak on. It's meant to be informative and raise awareness of the concerns that came through my office in the past year, in hopes that will serve the district well and serve district leaders in decisions going forward. And of course, this annual report data is very helpful in informing my office as a brand new office in my work going forward and my strategic goals going forward. So I hope to continue raising awareness and sharing this annual report. with district leaders, having conversations, answering any questions that they have. I do have regularly scheduled meetings with leadership, so as concerns come through the office, I am raising that awareness on a regular basis. The point is that this annual report should never have any surprises for leadership. They know what that's going to say as I have regular scheduled meetings with them. And then look forward to including historical data for comparison in future annual reports. I wanted to close by mentioning, well, a shout out to Kristen Peterson for helping me improve the format very much. My skills max out at a Word template for an annual report, and she made it much more visually pleasing. So thank you to Kristen for all of her hard work and time on that. But I wanted to mention that, in my note from the Ombuds, I mentioned that it can be very difficult and such a significant thing to reach out for assistance or help, specifically to a brand new position and to a brand new resource and office. So I really want to express the appreciation and gratitude for those that took a chance, on reaching out to the Ombuds office, especially in its first year. And then thank you to all those that were incredibly supportive of the Ombuds office and this role in its foundational first year. I truly look forward to continuing to serve the organization in a collaborative and positive way. I've learned a lot in the past year and look forward to applying those learnings in the following upcoming years. So at this time, I'll take any questions, comments.
Yeah, thank you, Janet, for that report. It was very detailed, and I thought it offered a great perspective on all the work that you put in the past year. And I just want to say one of the things in reading the report that really stuck with me was one of the feedback comments, that people are feeling heard and validated. And that's one of the most important aspects of this role. We want our people, whether it be our students, our parents or guardians, or our employees, to feel heard and validated and offered that support as they work through whatever issue that they're bringing to your office. So thank you for that. And at that time, I'll open it up to other directors with questions or comments.
Thank you, President Malone. I'm so glad that you brought that up too, because that is what struck me when I read the report this weekend on board docs. It's so important to feel heard and validated. And I'm also glad that you tied in with the HRS Level 1 framework, because that's the other thing that came to mind as I was reading all of the comments, how the work that you are doing is so important to our mission, and it ties in so nicely with the HRS framework. The empathy and humility and the approachability that you have. What you're doing there is you're teaching us all how to be leaders. And I don't know if anyone heard Superintendent Degner's graduation speech this May. Did anybody hear that speech? Did anybody hear it 6 times? So one of the takeaways from that speech is that we can all be leaders, and so I think that you are showing us all how to be leaders with your example, and so thank you for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Director Finch.
Happy, shining people holding hands. I mean, it's all good. I don't want to take a lot of time, but I will point out a couple of things. Everything everyone said, and word will spread, because that's how this is going to get around. People, we can advertise it, we can put it out there, but I think what's going to get people is when they talk to somebody who's been through the process and they realize there's a place to go. Your slide about if you had not on the survey results. So one, our number, I believe the number, I hope the numbers don't grow a lot, right? I hope a lot of people don't have a concern for an Ombuds. But when they do, and we have a resource, but to get that feedback and what would have happened if they didn't contact the Ombuds office, those are all like really bad things we don't want to happen. People leaving, lawsuits, or remaining unsatisfied. Like all of that is terrible. And here's the thing, because when I ran into 2017 and people were calling for an Ombuds, here's what they said. Iowa City Community School District has a retaliatory culture. That was the word, retaliatory culture. Not just that there were a couple things that happened, but that our culture was retaliatory. And the fact that you have all of 3 out of 100 who mentioned retaliation. So that it just helps us kind of dig this out and understand, and your report helps us more. I mean, I think we've all of us who are here have said how much we appreciate you and what you bring. But this really helps us see it and see what's going on and understand our district in a way that isn't hyperbole, that isn't one person had a bad experience and so they're, shouting that out, which gets a lot of attention, but that, we really go through this in a systemic way. And now we've got a place for folks to go to be validated and to be heard. But that's not it. It's not like you're just there to make people feel listened to. Then you go through and explain the process and help them navigate their concern and solve problems. So thank you. I look forward to the historical data. I just think it's really exciting. I think this is a lot. I wasn't expecting this much because I was like, oh, it's a year. Who really knows about this? Not a full year, 11 months of data. And coming out of COVID. So all of those things, I'm happy. Yeah, nice round number of 100.
Yeah.
But I think that also gives us a good idea, a beginning idea of how valuable this office is and you are in this office and the work that we're doing. So yeah, just thank you, and I just want to pile on the praise. So.
Thank you so much, Director Clausen. Appreciate it.
Are there any other questions or comments? Okay. Thank you so much,
Thank you very
Janet. We
much.
appreciate it. Next, we'll move on to the safety and security update.
Sure, and so I'm going to handle that one. We're going to do a high-level update here for you this evening, and I would just really start kind of where we left off with Janet's presentation and anchor back to one of our efforts to try to achieve that safe and collaborative culture that we look for in HRS Level 1 in our High Reliability Schools School Improvement Framework. And so to provide a safe culture, we have to have our buildings be safe and secure. We know that safety means a lot of different things for different students. This is probably more on our physical safety on some level, and some of the things that come to mind around intruder situations and mass harm events, things like that. But I think for an effort to reassure our community, we do have safety and emergency plans in place in every building. Today, in fact, we had a meeting this afternoon about some of our reunification and relocation plans here at the district office, because we would have a district team that would help facilitate that type of a process. So those plans are in place. The buildings are accountable to making sure those are produced and turned back into us on a yearly basis. We work closely with Johnson County Emergency Management. If we weren't working with them close before COVID, we are definitely now in a lot more seamless fashion. And so we're excited about some of the even opportunities that'll come forward out of that this year with some of their collaboration and their efforts around that. And part of that is with the Governor's School Safety Funds. We are going to have access to those funds, but a step in doing that is completing vulnerability assessments. And so Johnson County Emergency Management is going to facilitate us completing those assessments for that requirement. You could have worked with a state vendor to do that, and at first we had scheduled those, but as we talked to Johnson County more, we believe local law enforcement would be a good tool for us to complete that. They know our buildings. Those are confidential assessments that won't be available to the public because, of course, we wouldn't want to share our vulnerabilities out widely. But there will be things that probably come forward from a leadership perspective that we'd share with you guys that these are things we need to approve or need your blessing on to be able to move forward with. A couple other things that I would mention, we do Securely 24 and CARE assessment to try to ward off any potential concerns that we would have. So those are monitoring tools or assessment tools or just an assessment process that would help us try to head off any threats that would come, whether that's a threat we've learned about online or a threat that we've learned through just our student channels or students reporting to adults. And some of the tools that we have to help with that are that See Something, Say Something campaign that you see the posters around, and the kids are able to report things anonymously. Every day I have a couple emails, right, where things come through from students. Molly knows from being a building principal, those come through, and then you respond right away, timely, right? I mean, that pops in her email, and then she would go and try to investigate that situation and try to solve that. We're also working on the cybersecurity end. Last week, our first superintendent meeting of the year with Grantwood AEA was around cybersecurity, knowing that Cedar Rapids had just had an event, and they're trying to train us up to be thinking about some of those things. Adam's doing great because he already had an analysis identified for us, and that I was turning around the next day to complete the first part of our analysis about trying to identify any holes or problems we would have in that security effort. And then, just let me double check my list to see if I had got through the different things we talked about. Oh, I think another important part that we can't overlook either is just making sure that our staff is committed to the practices we have in place. So we know we've invested a lot through FMP 1.0. We'll continue to invest through FMP 2.0 in our safe and secure entrances and our buildings being safe, but we also have to make sure that the people are committed to safe practices, so locking doors or making sure that we're not propping doors open or wedging doors even when maybe it seems easier in the moment, right? But I think a lesson that a lot of the public learned from Uvalde was they had one of the most sophisticated safety and security systems you could have, but if if a human element of that breaks down, then we're in a whole lot of problems. So we have to continue to invest in our people and in our training. We train all new staff members in the ALICE protocol every year. We do intruder drills with our staff. We rotate between elementary and secondary because of capacity for law enforcement, and we put our staff through those drills. And so kind of the lead, I can answer some questions there, but I mean, the question I would maybe leave you guys with tonight, and I don't mean to put you on the spot if you're not ready to respond to that, but maybe a thought for conversation would be, what are we ready to do with students? I don't think our team would suggest drills by any means, but some level of conversation is probably appropriate, and it's different levels of appropriateness by age level, of course. But that wasn't something our team just wanted to move forward with without at least giving you guys a chance to respond to or think about. And you may want to talk to some of your constituents before you bring that back, because I think, honestly, our parents are going to have very differing feelings about it. I think probably pretty extreme reactions about it on both sides, and strong feelings about what we should or shouldn't do. So if you want some space to think about that before we come back with that, but I know that's a question that's been lingering for us again since the spring about, what is the right answer for students? And there's a lot of different schools that do a lot of different things as we've checked into it. So everything from ours, where we're pretty silent on it with the kids, other than maybe teachers that bring it up with their classrooms, but it's not a district-wide effort. But that's kind of a broad overview of some of the elements we have in place. Be happy to answer any questions around those or to take any initial first reactions you have to that intruder education for students.
Yeah, thanks, Matt. My initial reaction after having gone through some of that ALICE training personally, and it's clearly just a knee-jerk reaction for students, I'm very hesitant to say that's something we should put our kids through. Me being very sort of adult that's been in some tense situations, it was still very traumatic to sit through that training, and left me with some residual trauma that I had to process. And so I don't think personally I'm ready to say, yeah, let's put our kids, even our high school kids, through that, knowing all the other things that they're going through as teenagers. But again, I think for me, I would like that space to talk more with our parents and our families to make sure I'm not just having that knee-jerk reaction based on my own personal experience. But I did have a question, because as you brought up the situation down in Texas, Uvada, we heard about someone leaving a door open. So are we doing sort of these random checks of our buildings to make sure that people are following protocols? How are we making sure that we're not leaving doors propped open, and just for convenience sake?
Yeah, and I think that's one thing that honestly we're talking about how we get better at. And so again, for part of our work as the district level around HRS and some of these indicators is, okay, what is our check to see, the data check that we have, or how can we help buildings gather some data around, are their doors safe? And so we even talked about that item this afternoon about some potential ways we could try to get some data on some visits or some visit schedules or routine checks of our buildings to make sure those doors are locked. One point you made too that I want to come back to, just as we use the vocabulary, Ruthina did a nice job with it, that the training we do with all of our new staff is more of like an officer comes in and actually just walks them through some PowerPoint slides, but talks about actually what you would do. And that's still traumatic, like Ruthina was talking about, let alone the drills that we do ask our staff to do, which, I mean, that is a different level of concern for some of our staff members, right? So again, not suggesting the drills at all, but even like what Ruthina was talking about with the training, I mean, there's going to be some strong feelings around that too, as she articulated well. But I do think we're going to have to get better about some data collection too, about that human element and where we need to retrain and refocus. And again, that's what the HRS structure will help us do.
Great.
Couple of thoughts, and then the training. I think what Ruthina said, it is the fall of 2022, and I get that it's easy to leave doors open because you want to take your class outside, you want it to be convenient. We cannot be doing, I mean, our teachers, there is just no excuse for taking shortcuts around building safety, because while it may be convenient and it's a very small potential to be tragic, the possibility to have a terrible outcome is just, it's not worth the risk. So I just hope that we are messaging, and I like the idea of, I know when I work at the courthouse, the court security officers make random just walkthroughs of the building on a regular basis, and they're checking things, and I don't know if we can do something with that. I know we're strapped for resources at the school, but even something simple like that, like a quick unplanned thing once a week so a building principal can know if they need to issue spot. The other thing is with the anonymous reporting for the students. I think this is such a great tool. I too, unfortunately, have to do the intruder training each year for my job. And at my training a couple weeks ago, we were told that of the 10 most kind of prominent active shooting events in recent times, every single one of those shooters posted something online before the event and gave an indication that something was going to happen. And so the more that we can message to our students that it's anonymous and it's easy, and we would rather have you over-report something that turns out to not be a big deal whatsoever than under-report because you don't want to bother people. I think that with these See Something, Say Something programs, that's the biggest initial hurdle, is letting everybody know that you're not bothering people by reporting something that you're concerned about and messaging that we want those reports to come in. I think that would have, that's going to be our number one tool in the toolkit. I share a lot of the same feelings about the drills as President Malone. I wonder if there's a way to work in some of the work with the drills that we do already. So with the fire drills, instead of calling them, instead of saying this is a fire drill, just softer, just say, when something unexpected happens at school, you're going to listen to your teacher, or whatever but just to kind of get students used to understanding that when something unexpected, whether that be fire, tornado, intruder, whatever, when we don't necessarily have to name the harm, we can just say, this is what you do. You listen to your teacher, you follow directions, you don't do your own thing, and you work together to do where you need to. So, something like that kind of straddles. We're preparing our students, but we're not inflicting this trauma, which again, if you haven't been through ALICE training, one of the ones I had to do is we had to be in our office, and you didn't know when in the day they were going to come, but they trained you in the morning, and in the afternoon you just sat around all day waiting for it to happen, and then it did, and it was really terrible. I don't want to do that to students.
And that's more the drills I'm talking
Yeah,
about, right?
those
That's the drills that we
are-
do with staff, right? The training would be more, what is ALICE, right? What does that mean?
Yeah.
What do you do in those scenarios? And the part that's tricky too, sorry, I kind of jumped in there, Director Williams, but kids are part of the ones holding the doors open for people too, right? And so that's the tricky part, is how do we then have the conversation with them about why this is important, right? And why we don't want to be doing that, and why you don't know, and why we need to commit to buzzing in. And I know it's a pain, you got to walk and ask to be let in, but these are important practices for us all to commit to keep being safe, right? So that's, I think, where, it's tricky, but, if some balance is going to be found, I think those are the types of things that, in reality, especially our secondary kids, they've heard of these events, right? I mean, so it's out there, they know it, they've seen it, they see it on social media. I mean, we're not, that's out there. So then what are we doing with them to also help them prepare and also understand why some of the things we're asking them to do are important to do?
Well, I definitely think an education component about why we don't let people in, why if you see something, you say something, that to me seems like it could have some really beneficial, at the secondary level, reap some benefits.
My feedback, and we've discussed it before, is I have kids that are 11, 13, and 15, and we love action-adventure movies, and, we watch the news, and even for my kids, I wouldn't want to go through any of that stuff with them. And I know there are a lot of kids that aren't as, that might feel more vulnerable to any of that training. So my feedback is I don't want to do that in the schools. As far as figuring out how to message, don't let people in. I think you can do that without saying, because they might have a gun. I think we can say, because it's how we keep our buildings secure. And I think kids learn that with fire drills and tornado drills, that they do have to follow what their teacher says. So I don't think we need to, they get that they are told to do that with any drill situation. So I think that we are doing a good job with our elementary kids as it is. They'll follow what the parents say. And I think we can teach kids not to open doors. But, high school kids are gonna open the door for their buddy. They open the door for me when I show up at City High because I look desperate. That's gonna be tricky.
But that's a problem, right?
It's a problem.
They shouldn't open the door for you.
They shouldn't.
Right?
Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely, they shouldn't. I'm just saying, we all know how many doors there are on
Yeah.
these schools, and I don't know how in the world you can make that a foolproof situation.
Right. That's the other challenge, right? Like, it's not going to be 100% consistent. So, and that might be where it's another strategy in place for us. So not only collecting the data to find out when doors are open, but what are our system checks to say how many times a day are we checking the doors, right? We probably know it's more problematic at lunch on our high school campuses, right? We're going to have more doors unlocked. We're going to have more kids coming and going. There's going to be more traffic. So I think for us, it's probably just continuing to look at what those systems are. I think, I can agree with what Director Pilcher-Hayek's saying, right? I think we can also talk to our kids about why it's important to do that without going into full-blown active intruder situations, right? But I think in some way, it's just continuing to find those balances, is continuing to try to address it. The overall theme is don't forget about the human element, because we can do all the things we want to, investing dollars into our campuses and our physical structures, but the human element's also important in all of this.
I will add that at my most recent training, some people asked about if the school's training conflicted with the training that we were receiving as adults, what should they tell their kids? And the instructor said, you should tell them to train the way that I'm training you and that they should ignore their teachers. So I wouldn't take for granted that kids are necessarily going to listen to their teachers. I think we have some parents with very strong feelings on this, and that they are going to have conversations with their kids, and they may be telling them not to do what their teachers are telling them to do. And so
If that happens, though, there's nothing that the teacher's going to say that's going to make a difference. That what you just described is going to be the exception, and what's the workaround? I don't know. If a teacher says, no, but listen to me, and the parent says, no, but listen to me, I don't understand
Well, if we give no messaging, then they'll definitely do what their parents say and do their own thing. If we give counter messaging, then there's a chance that the counter messaging may prevail.
I'll just real quick emphasize this human element. So also on cybersecurity, because that's what's going to keep us safe. So having to deal with some of that fallout, Adam, the money we're spending on site, it's all reinforced. It's important because it's a hard thing for an organization to do, because what's the payoff? What do I get out of it? If nothing happens, it doesn't seem like that was money well spent. It's money well spent, one. So we have a lot of good tools in place, but also the most important part of cybersecurity are the people not giving out their password. That's it. Don't do that, right? So that's the number one thing. And then I like, what folks have said about getting kids prepared. I also am not in favor of the drills, have been through it, and I don't know that there's demonstrated effectiveness to putting kids through that. But I will say this, a lot of those school shooters also were bullied. And so the more that we can do that and keep our kids safe from bullying and being those ostracized, isolated kids that turn into somebody who would do something like that, again, that goes back to see something, say something, that goes back to the relationships we have with every single one of our kids, knowing that every single one of our kids feels like they belong and they're connected in our school is probably what we have more control over than a lot of this other stuff the messages are getting at home. Because once they show up in our building, they belong, and they need to know that, every single one of them. Right? Because that's what you can go back through all these folks that went that way, and all of them had these crappy experiences and these terrible stories, and it turned into something even more horrible. But somebody somewhere could have done something. somebody somewhere said, you know what, there's that kid that looks alone all of the time, and what's going on with them? Because that helps us in so many other ways with suicide prevention and with, kids who might be self-harming or having those thoughts. That addresses all of that stuff. So not that we never forget that that's really what we're doing here. And that's something we can do all of the time. And you know what? That feels good all of the time, to have a kid reach out and make sure they belong. So just want to put that out there.
Yeah, the bullying component is so important. Ostracizing a human being is the single worst thing that you can do to anyone. And so also I think that the way that we are changing the way that we approach discipline is so important. And the way that we are handling those situations and treating those kids with our restorative practices, bringing them back into our community and making sure that they understand that they belong and they are not bad people, but maybe did something, a bad thing, and that it does not define them and they can move on from that. So there's so many things that we are doing in this district that are helping to keep us safe.
That's the thing, right? We want to invest in all the preventative pieces that we can. And so I think it's looking through the list of items that we talked about tonight, focusing on those prevention elements the best we can, and making sure we are prepared, but hoping that we're over-prepared if we never need it. So
I appreciate this topic and the fact that we'll see it again, and we'll come back to it as we think more about how to best prepare our students and communicate with our students. So thank you so much. Next on the discussion item is Boardroom Technology Refresh Update. Is that you or Adam?
Adam's going to take that one. You guys already approved a contract for the technology upgrade that'll happen in this room, but we had a question about just kind of walking through what that'll mean and what that equipment's going to potentially allow us to do.
Yeah, so I just want to provide a quick update about what we're looking at in terms of the increased capabilities that we'll have in this space, and then also just some of the improvements to the space in terms of the technology we have available. So fundamentally, the biggest thing that this upgrade will do is to facilitate remote meeting participation, whether that's board members participating remotely, presenters, for instance, who wouldn't have to fly in necessarily if they're from a vendor, for example, or members of the public who are participating during community comment or otherwise. They'll be able to be seen and heard within this space and online. They'll hear the audio from the meeting with us not having to do weird things with telephones like we've done in the past. And some of the upgrades that will take place help us avoid some of those audio feedback issues that have prevented us from doing that in the past. The platform we'll use for that remote meeting capability is simply Zoom. So it doesn't require any new platform or new technology in terms of what the user would experience. So it's something that as a district we've certainly used heavily for years, and so should be fairly familiar to both district staff, board members, and members of the public. In terms of some of the other improvements that'll take place, and some of these are required to facilitate that remote participation, and some are not. Some are part of regularly scheduled updates that would have actually taken place, or at least we would have put in order, supply chains aside, already, as we were working through what we wanted to do in terms of adding that remote meeting capability. Some of those include improved display controllers. So right now we are locked into, as you can see, all of our displays have the same thing on them. And this room is cabled that way. There's really no way without cabling changes and video equipment controller upgrades to do anything else. The new platform will give us the ability to split displays. So for example, if we have remote meeting participants, we can have those meeting participants, like a remote board member or a presenter, on one of the display pairs. We have two display pairs, or a display pair behind you at the board table, a display pair over here, and then each of the breakout spaces behind has a display on the wall, and then the projector mounted on the ceiling. Those can be split. So we can have the meeting agenda on one display and a presenter on another. We can have a slideshow on one display and a presenter on another. When we're doing in-person work, we can split with the agenda remaining up so people can follow that and then have a slideshow, for example, on another display. So it gives us that ability to control what we're showing and kind of extend the capabilities that we have here in the room. The displays themselves will be upgraded. These are actually the oldest displays we have in the entire district. And so they will be upgraded and replaced. And we have some improvements there beyond simply new technology to replace the projectors, for example. The 2 spots behind the board table will actually be replaced with very large, dream living room LED displays that are similar in size to the projected image here, but we'll move that up. We've always had an issue with the brightness of the projectors and what we can achieve with this well-lit room for those rear displays. Those will be much more readable to members of the public so that they have an easier ability to see what's going on. So obviously, newer and higher quality displays all around. Those 2 rear ones will also be raised up so that board members aren't like sitting right in front of them, kind of blocking the bottoms of those. So those will be upgraded. And then the other component of the upgrades is related to that, but the conference breakout spaces. So when this isn't being used as a boardroom, we can divide it into 3 separate conference rooms that we call PDC A, B, and C. They have dividers, and each of those will actually be capable of hybrid meetings as well. So if we have a meeting where we need to bring someone in who's at a school, rather than having them drive to the ESC, they'll be able to hear what's going on in the room. They'll be able to see what's going on in the room with motion tracking cameras that'll zoom in on the person speaking. So again, just really improving our capabilities in this space and ultimately extending what we're capable of in terms of flexibility of use. So we're accomplishing all of those things. We do, a couple things to keep in mind. One is due to simply supply chain issues. We don't expect to receive this equipment until Q3 of fiscal year 2023, which would be the first 3 months of 2023. So we'd expect to receive the equipment during that time and coordinate install as soon as we can thereafter. There's a chance that it would be installed sooner. It's possible it won't be installed until this coming summer. Again, simply that's the reality at the moment for this type of equipment. And then beyond that, one of the other questions that I've heard is, is there flexibility if we decided to reconfigure this space or to move this space? Do we have flexibility to address that potential? And the answer is yes. There would certainly be some changes in terms of, lengths of cable required, and we'd have to deal with some supply changes along the way. But the fundamental technology really could be used in multiple spaces with multiple designs. So we feel pretty comfortable with that. So I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you, Adam. That's really exciting to hear, especially the piece where community members would have the option of engaging with us, doing community comment, and not necessarily having to be in the room. Just from someone who does not drive, getting here for some of our families could be difficult, so having that option makes a lot of sense. I had a question and I lost it. Go ahead, Lisa.
Who's going to run the tech? Are you going to come up to the table with us? Is
Yep.
President Malone in charge?
So we have an AV technician who's actually one of our high school building technicians who, as an additional part of his contract, already provides AV support for board meetings. And he's the one who's actually in a room back here that's controlling all of the video and making sure that it's recorded, getting it posted, that sort of thing. And ultimately, the responsibility for managing which video feeds are going where, that sort of thing, will fall to the individual staff member in that control room.
Great. The question came back to me. For installation, would there be a need for us to relocate during that installation period, our regularly scheduled board meetings, or is that something that installation could happen around our meeting schedule?
That's a great question, and we did ask the vendor that, and ultimately they believe that once they get all of the equipment in, they would only need about a week of dedicated access to this space to get everything installed and configured. That said, there's an element of construction that's involved with this, so I wouldn't, bet the house on that, but at the same time, I think that's a reasonable estimate that if we planned this to take place between board meetings, we'd probably be okay.
Okay, great. there any other questions or
Real quick,
points?
and maybe I'll be disappointed, any sound upgrades?
Yes, we will have sound upgrades, both in terms of speaker upgrades as well as mic upgrades. All of the mics here will be replaced. We're also looking at, I shouldn't say looking at, it is in the quote and in the plan. We're also expanding the range of microphone types that we use, especially not so much for the board table, although Math Space will finally get a microphone that's permanent, but not so much for the board table, but for speakers and anybody else. Right now, we don't really have an access to a wide range of microphone types. This will include that.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thank you so much, Adam. With that, we'll move on to our action items. The first one is the Northwest High Drainage and Trail Easement. That was a public hearing. Are there any discussion remarks related to that? Okay, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the Northwest Junior High Drainage and Trail Easement.
And a second.
Second.
All right, Kim, we are ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Dr. Abraham, how would you like to vote? Thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next action item is surrounding our revised board meeting schedule. As directors will remember, we decided not to hold our meeting on the same night as the election this November. So we will instead meet on the 15th, and I think the other change was not meeting right before Thanksgiving. So we'll do the 15th and the 29th. Is there any additional discussion related to those changes? All right, is there a motion?
I move that we approve the revised 2022-23 board meeting schedule.
A second?
Second.
All right, and last time for further discussion? All right, Kim, we're ready to vote.
Online voting is open. Dr. Abraham, thank you. All votes have been cast and the motion carries with all directors voting in favor.
Thank you, Kim. Next, Director Liaison report. Are there any things that directors would like to highlight regarding their activities from the last month?
I would, actually. So to add to mine and also to Director Finch's, we had another meeting with our, we finally have a name for the families that live at Cole and Regency. They'd like to be called Latinos para la Educación, Latinos for Education. I'm going to talk to them about whether there's a cool abbreviation we can use too. But we had a wonderful meeting. The Hills principal joined us, Reagan Bosset. Sorry, I didn't know if I'd pronounced her name correctly. She was wonderful and fielded a bunch of questions. So that group will continue to meet every other week. And then I also should report I was a liaison to the Iowa City Downtown District Legislative Committee today, and a liaison to Project Better Together 2030. And finally, with the teacher librarians, they have the visiting author this year's great. It's an author and an illustrator, and if you get a chance to look at the curriculum, our teacher librarians knock it out of the park, and they've done it again. This curriculum is just beautiful. So I think that's the last liaison update I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Pilcher-Hyatt. Is there any other? I just wanted to give a special shout out and thank you to Eliza, Carmen, and Lucas for allowing me to interrupt their busy schedule with meeting with them this past week. It's all my days blend together, last Friday. So it was a great opportunity just to touch base and find out more about some of the projects and their passions with the district. I am very thrilled to have them, as well as everybody sitting out there with us. And I hope to continue to meet with our ESC staff and directors, as I mentioned, as I was walking through and saw people who were like, wait, what? Why aren't you meeting with me? Don't worry, I'll get on your schedule. And also to mention, my visit to Alexander Elementary was amazing. That's one of the pieces that I really do look forward to in this job. It's one of the great forms of payment to actually get in the building and see our work in action with some of the classroom sizes, talking with teachers about some of the decisions from the board table, as well as building administrators. So I just really encourage other directors, if your schedule allow, to get in our buildings, because in talking with someone, I felt a little bit sad to hear that they were a building principal for 9 years and never had a director actually come out and do one of those visits. So I hope that going forward, we don't have any other administrators that say that or feel that way, that they would have loved to have us in their building.
I do know that we go to those buildings with DPO, the directors do, that they might not be thinking of it, because we are at those buildings every month.
I think it's a little bit different because it's a visit, and the principal, blocks off their schedule. For me, I ask to show me what you want to show me, but I ask for certain classrooms if I can see grade level, especially like in certain buildings, kindergarten, first grade, just to get a sense of what's actually happening in some of these classrooms related to class size, and spend time one-on-one talking to building principals and finding out if they had a magic wand and could ask anything from the directors, what would it be? And it's always realistic things surrounding RAM or better understanding of how our policies directly impact their day-to-day. So
That's great.
Is there anything else? I don't want to hog the conversation. Okay. Agenda setting. We do have a closed session on Monday that will start at 5 o'clock, just a reminder. And then on the 27th, P&G, just a plug out there, we lost the third for P&G. So Molly, you're more than welcome to jump on there if you like, but if there's anyone else that's interested in joining, or it's open to all directors, but the members are Jane and myself, and we do need a third. So that will be on Monday.
And we need a new chair.
I'm sorry?
And we need a new chair.
Yes, we need a new chair because Sean was the chair. So, and that typically takes place at 5 o'clock. Before the regularly scheduled board meeting, and we'll go to that agenda. We have the education showcase and just the standing items. I don't know if there's other items that either Superintendent Degner you would like for us to consider, or the board members would like for us to consider adding.
President Malone, there's one item that I've been sort of discussing with Superintendent Degner about possibly presenting at a meeting in regards to just educating us about the prairies that we have in our schools in the district.
Is that something that we could tackle at that meeting?
Yep, definitely.
Okay.
Yep.
And then I talked to Director Malone about this a little bit ago, that I don't know if we usually include the legislative, what's it called?
Legislative priorities.
Thank you, to include the gun amendment.
So-
To take a look at that, as we have in the past, look at certain legislative priorities, because I believe voting begins October 19th. So if we want to take a position on that, then we need to be thinking about it.
Yeah, it'd be just good for us, I think, to have we'll just maybe have the agenda item legislative priorities and then talk about that piece in there. I think that's what we're saying. So it would be good for us to start that conversation anyways.
Yeah, thanks for that reminder. Normally, we're just getting ready for the session, so
Yeah.
that's changes the timeline. One thing, this is kind of on the prairie question, but because I know we've heard things and people talk about prairies on some of our land, right? Like this would be a really good thing. But here's something I've been meaning to say, I just haven't been brought it up. And prairies are one thing, but also on some of our land, could we think about community use? So like a park. So a prairie looks nice and it does lots of good things for the environment, but you can't use it. So I would also think about, if we're thinking about, the ways to use our land, this is public land that the public has paid for through taxpayer dollars, and it'd be nice if people could use it, like right? I mean, we have people use our buildings, but I'm just thinking that that's another use other than just Prairie, which has benefits, but so does public use. You know, people just saying, hey, this is a nice park close to this school, because we have playgrounds and that gets used in that ways. But I think we could think about green space and park space in addition to something like
Can we
prairies.
hear that at the same time? Perhaps?
Yeah,
Is that
well,
what you're
that's why I
proposing?
mentioned
Yeah.
it, because
I
if
made
we're
a
going
note
to
of
talk
that. We'll
about
talk
that,
about
could
it.
we?
Yeah.
Is that
have
something that
conversation?
we
We'll
could
include that.
potentially?
That's what I'm bringing up, and it's something I've been meaning to talk about whenever I drive by West High with that giant lawn, and how much we mow it. If, hey, you know, is this community, and community members have brought that up as well.
Right.
Anyway.
Are there any?
Or just a clarification, are we not having an ed committee meeting on September 20th?
That's the point
Thank
I was
you.
going to bring up. We'd like to delay that till October.
Okay.
And so if we could start our ed committee meetings in October, I think that would be what we would choose to do there. So then we wouldn't have a meeting on the 20th, but we would work with you guys about the topics for that. And of course, Brady's a great teammate in pulling together some good topics there. So yeah, we would say no for September.
I don't have an objection unless other board members, okay?
You know, I'm on the operations committee, and we don't have meetings for a long time because we made them full board meetings. So I'm just wondering, and I would think Molly's probably wondering this too, as we're looking at how these meetings work. Are we planning on having those again, or what's the plan with the operations committee?
So Ops Committee meets the second Tuesday of the month. It's supposed to, and like you said, we've been seating a lot of those meeting times. Chase and I have been discussing getting back, and the plan is to have an October Ops meeting at its regularly scheduled time.
Great. That answers my question.
Great, thank you. Any other items for agenda setting?
Not right now. I'm sure we'll have a couple that'll come up, but I didn't have anything on the list for this evening, so.
Sounds good. And before we close, I just wanted to thank our admin team for sitting with us tonight and being actively engaged. I know all of you have a very long day, so having you here with us means a lot to me. With that, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Meeting adjourned. Thank you so much. Have a